Arnold Schwarzenegger slams border crisis. Claims system is stupid. Former California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger weighed in on the ongoing migrant crisis at the U.S. Mexico border and had some strong words about how officials are handling the situation. The Terminator star slammed policies that have allowed more than 2.8 million to cross this year alone, and called for reform as a result. Citing his own heritage as an immigrant, the 76-year-old said during an appearance on Monday's The View that there was no single solution to the country's current woes, but criticized the current, lax conditions at the nearly 2,000-mile-long crossing. Time equals 400 ms. Greater than he aired a desire for a more rigid border that is not so easily traversed, as well as his belief that asylum seekers should be granted visas so they can work here legally. It's a stupid system, the aging actor said. It's set up to commit a crime. Conversing with hosts Whoopi Goldberg, Sara Haines, Navarro, Sonny Hostin, and former Donald Trump aide Farah Griffin, the storied actor at first prefaced how he was in the middle of the road over the issue after being asked about it by Navarro. A political strategist herself, Navarro, 51, said aloud, "You are one of the country's most famous immigrants and a former two-term Republican governor of California back when Republicans were sane." She went on to ask, "What do you think about the current immigration crisis? Because you have such a unique perspective, and what's going on at the border?" After a brief pause where the actor-turned-politician appeared to consider the question, he offered a thoughtful response. "I've seen firsthand how this is not a one-kind-of-a-step approach," he began, after being asked about President Joe Biden's recently aired plans to build 20 miles of border wall within Texas' Rio Grande Valley, a popular point of crossing. The decision, announced Thursday, puzzled many, as the 80-year-old head of state had campaigned heavily on promises that he would never build even another foot of wall, unlike his predecessor Donald Trump. Schwarzenegger, who secured his California gubernatorial seat as a Republican in 2003, continued, "You have to really have comprehensive immigration reform, and you have to look at this immigration problem in a comprehensive way. Number one," he said, was that he believes very strongly in having a border that no one can get through. "That's number one for me," the retired bodybuilder said. "Time equals 400 ms. Greater than. Number two," he said, "is that we have visas available for people that want to work in the United States so they don't have to work illegally." The assertion, coming from a native Austrian who emigrated to America in 1968 but did not become a citizen until 1983, came days after New York's governor, Kathy Hochul, announced that 18,000 jobs are now available to select migrants given temporary protected status by the Biden administration. Only pertaining to migrants from Venezuela, thought to account for nearly half of the now daily arrivals at the southern border. The move was designed to authorize them for work more quickly, as cities continue to deal with an influx of newcomers. Time equals 400 ms. Greater than. While some conservatives slammed the move, Schwarzenegger didn't agree. "It is bogus," he said of the fact that lawmakers are still opposed to such a measure, given the country's current labor shortage. "We need the workers here," he added, welcoming other efforts to help connect willing migrants with workplaces that will employ them. He proceeded to slam the current system in place as stupid, claiming it's set up to further divide Americans and fuel already ongoing crime. "Why can we not come together, Democrats and Republicans, and instead of using this issue always as a fundraising issue for the party, to go and sit down together and really to do the service that they're supposed to do?" He went on to add how he believed strongly in a more pronounced defense at the border, due to prospective instances of terrorism, the potential great danger, or roaming drug cartels. "We have to have a secure border, but we've got to go and reform our system," he said, seeking to appeal to the notoriously progressive panel's analytical side. "That's where the action is, I think," he concluded. The conversation came days after The View co-hosts coatized Biden's bizarre backtrack Friday, likely with former President Trump in mind. Speaking about the about-face, Haines appeared to lay blame on the GOP-dominated Congress rather than the Democrat. "How I would have come out and handled it: 1. I'd put Biden on the mic right away," she said. "Put him on the mic and say, 'This is not my wall. This is Congress' wall. It was appropriated in 2019. I'd be literally committing a crime by disobeying this, and we have a lot of that already happening. So we're gonna go ahead and follow the law.'" She added of the president's announcement, "It didn't come out strong, and I thought the messaging looked weak, and it was confusing." The abrupt declaration came as the continuing border crisis reached crisis levels last month, especially after the recent rescinding of Trump's Title 42, a move that has made it easier for migrants to seek asylum while circumventing border laws. As the crisis continues to worsen with each day, Mexico recently announced a new agreement with the U.S. to deport migrants from its border cities to their home countries. The deal will also take actions to deter migrants from traveling by rails, as part of a new effort to combat the recent surge in border crossings. Despite violence from drug cartels and the dangers that come with riding atop the train cars, such freight trains still remain popular. That said, the closures temporarily cut off one of the most transited migratory routes in the country at a time of surging migration. It also further underscores the historic numbers of people heading north in search of a new life in the U.S., and the dilemma it poses for nations in Central and South America, as they also struggle to cope with the amounts of migrants traversing their territories. Time equals 400 ms greater than stateside. Matters are even worse, after more than 3 years of thousands of illegal entries a day, leaving states like Texas, and more recently New York, at a loss. The Biden administration, even after its rescinding of Title 42, has failed to address the crisis, and is actually turning a lower percentage of border-crossing migrants back into Mexico than his predecessor. Statistics show, according to federal data, an average of 1,000 people have been sent back across the border each month since Title 42 ended, compared with nearly 3,000 the month before. In August, the U.S. Border Patrol made 181,509 arrests at the Mexican border, up 37% from July, but little changed from August 2022 and well below the high of more than 220,000 in December, according to figures released Friday. It reversed a plunge in the numbers after new asylum restrictions were introduced in May. That comes after years of steadily rising migration levels produced by economic crisis and political and social turmoil in many of the countries people are fleeing. Once, just dozens of migrants from Central American countries would pass through Irapuato by train each day, said Marta Ponce, a 73-year-old from who has spent more than a decade providing aid to those who travel the tracks running through her town. Now, that number often reaches the thousands. And migrants come from all over, including African nations, Russia and Ukraine. Most travel through the Darien Gap, a days-long trek across the rugged Colombia-Panama border. The crossing was once so dangerous that few dared to attempt it, but now so many migrants flood through its dense jungles that it's rapidly become a migratory highway similar to the trains winding through Mexico. Crossings of the Darien Gap, a 66 roadless miles of dense, mountainous jungle and swamp filled with armed guerrillas and drug traffickers in Panama, have shot up so much they could approach 500,000 people this year alone. Colombia, which has taken on the brunt of the exodus from Venezuela, has long called on the international community for aid. Panama and Costa Rica, meanwhile, have tightened migratory restrictions and demanded that something be done about hundreds of thousands of people passing through the notoriously dangerous gap. Panama even launched a campaign dubbed Darien as a jungle, not a highway. The Biden administration has pushed Mexico and Central American nations to control migratory flows and now requires asylum seekers to register through an app known as CBP-1, despite its failure to address crises occurring in New York and Texas on American soil. Late last month, the Biden administration announced it would grant temporary protected status to nearly 500,000 more Venezuelans already in the country. Activists like Ponce say to expect other methods of crossing, such as migration along the country's train lines, to grow. As migrants climbed onto the train early Saturday morning, they cheered as the train picked up speed and continued them on their winding route north, a destination they reached in roughly a day. When they touch down, a new struggle awaits, as politicians like Eric Adams mull policies that could put an end to complimentary stays in hotels and shelters for the thousands of visitors, and instead thrust them out on the streets within 2 months of arrival. This comes as countless arrivals have found themselves with nowhere to sleep and nowhere to work, spurring protests, homelessness, and unrest from weary locals. Border Patrol sources told ABC News that nearly 9,000 migrants were apprehended at the U.S. Mexico border that day alone, the highest rate since May. Texas Governor Greg Abbott, meanwhile, has continued to eviscerate President Biden for allowing the unfolding disaster. His office said it is regularly reinstalling razor wire brought down by the flood of asylum seekers. Read the full story https://www.dailymail.co.uk/news/article-1261210/arnold-schwarzenegger-view-migrant-crisis-mexico-border.html?? Question mark ito equals MSN Gallery went more stories like this from the Daily Mail? Visit our profile page here and hit the follow button above for more of the news you need.